Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's presenter, Mr. Eric Winton. He's a Senior Manager with Hitachi Consulting. Eric, take it away.
Thanks, Miriam. My name is Eric Winton. I'm a Senior Manager with Hitachi Consulting, and I've been working with reporting services since it very first came out. Was on one of the very first large implementations with a very first, sorry, I just saw a question here. One of the very first implementations of reporting services. Perhaps some of you have seen the Mary Kay case study that was released with the reporting services launch back in 2002, and that was a project that I had worked on. So I've had a lot of experience with reporting services, and through Hitachi Consulting, we've done multiple engagements to help companies migrate from Crystal Reports to reporting services. So this talk is going to focus on migrating from from Crystal Reports to reporting services, how to go about it, and then we're actually going to get into a little bit of detail behind it. So as far as session prerequisites go, there's really not a whole lot for this session. This is intended to be just an educational session about basic functionality with Crystal Reports and reporting services, how they map to each other, and some tips to go through your migration. So if you know Crystal Reports, great. If you know reporting services, great. But I think if you just have some base knowledge on this, you'll get through the talk. So for our agenda here, we're going to start by discussing why our company is migrating, and then we'll go through the steps of what you're going to want to do to complete your migration from Crystal Reports to reporting services. So we'll talk about some of the things you need to do to plan your migration implementation, which is a really key part of this. Next we'll look at migrating Crystal Reports section by section. So we'll go through section by section. How would you migrate a Crystal Reports over to reporting services application? And then from there, I'll actually do a sample migration so you can see the pieces and the logical steps you would go through to be able to migrate a Crystal Report to reporting services. And we'll talk about some of the additional sections and features that we'll migrate, talk about some of the alternative migration approaches out there. There are some third-party tools and vendors, things like that, that can help your company get on the right path. And then there's some reporting services links at the end. Okay, so first off, why are companies migrating to reporting services? Now, at Hitachi Consulting, we talk to a lot of companies about migrating to reporting services, and sometimes you'll see there's just a developer who happens to be a Microsoft developer, and he's seen reporting services and decides, you know what, that looks like a cool technology, and I want to migrate. And typically, you know, those type of one-off things are not something that's going to drive a reporting services implementation. So the things companies are really looking at is leveraging their existing SQL Server 2005 investment and SQL Server in general. The way Microsoft has packaged reporting services with SQL Server makes it a very attractive option for companies who already have SQL Server in-house. So a lot of times they want to leverage their existing investment and their existing skills in SQL Server to upgrade and migrate to reporting services. SQL Server 2005 obviously has a lot of new enhancements. We'll go into some of those. You have a rapid report development and deployment using SQL Server Business Intelligence Studio. It's basically Visual Studio. With the release of SQL 2005, there's now Business Intelligence Studio, which doesn't require you to have an additional license for Visual Studio to do reporting services development. So that's kind of nice, and we'll go through some of that as well. And then finally, the RDL. It's XML based. It's an open source type thing, and it's going to become a standard language, language going forward. So leveraging the existing SQL Server 2005 investment. SQL Server 2005 has a complete suite of business intelligence tools. So you've got your database server, SQL Server 2005, which has had significant upgrades and feature additions over SQL Server 2000. Some of the enhancements include major performance enhancements, enhancements to the core database server itself to make it a more scalable, enterprise-ready server, and it's rapidly gaining market share. Data analysis, SQL Server 2005 analysis services. Analysis services is the OLAP platform. They are the market leader in SQL Server 2005 with some of the things they've introduced around data mining. Has just been really phenomenal and provides you a full OLAP solution as part of your SQL Server investment. ETL tool, integration services is the ETL tool for SQL Server 2005. Integration services is a contender in the enterprise ETL space now, and companies are really trying to leverage that inside of their full SQL Server investment. And finally, reporting. SQL Server 2005 reporting services, some of the core enhancements over SQL Server 2000 reporting services have really pushed reporting services to the forefront of enterprise reporting tools. So some of the core enhancements with SQL Server 2005 reporting services, significant performance enhancements in 2005. We just through some of the upgrades I've seen at some of our clients upgrading from SQL 2000 to 2005, some of the enhancements they've made around caching and performance enhancements on reporting services have significantly improved our clients' performance, especially with some of the larger reports and exports to Excel. There's a direct client printing function now with SQL 2000. If you wanted to do client printing from your HTML rendering of the reporting services report, it had to be done through creating a printer extension, and now there is direct client printing. So you can render a report to HTML, and then there's a print button that you can print directly to your from your client side. You can do printing. End user sorting, the user can sort their own reports. Multi-value parameters, this was really a key one, and we'll actually go through, this is part of the demo. You'll get to see the multi-value parameter drop-down list box that they've included as one of the parameter controls for your reporting services reports. In the past, if you wanted to do multi-value parameters, you either had to create a custom control and then implement that within your website or your SharePoint portal, however you were deploying reporting services reports. Now there is a control that comes with reporting services. Custom report items, you can now create custom report items within your report. There's been report designer enhancements to make the experience of creating a report a little bit better. Tighter integration with SQL Server 2005 analysis services. One thing with analysis services is now you can actually, there's an MDX editor within the query builder, which makes creating analysis service reports that with analysis services data source much easier. There's tighter integration with SharePoint. There's web parts that come with SharePoint or that are part of reporting services that allow you to be able to go in and configure reports and deploy them within SharePoint fairly seamlessly and with very little or no code at all, which makes it a really nice fit for a Microsoft solution from end to end. And probably the biggest one, biggest release with SQL 2005 that I've seen that's had the most impact on some of our clients is empowering the end user with ad hoc reporting. With SQL 2000, that was one of the major limitations with reporting services, was that if your end users wanted to be able to go in and create their own reports, there was no way to do that besides third-party tools or giving your end users Visual Studio, which a lot of times that scares the end user. And with SQL 2005, they've released Report Builder, which is an end user tool. So it's a light, smart client application, click once, deploy, and your users will be able to go in and access models that your IT staff can create. And from these models, they'll be able to create their reports that are basically logical business representations of your data. So we've seen a lot of our clients start to take advantage of Report Builder for certain solutions, and it fits really nicely in a full end-to-end business intelligence, enterprise data, enterprise information solution as part of an end-user ad hoc reporting tool. Another one of the major benefits is rapid report development and deployment using BI Studio. So BI Studio was just released in SQL 2005, and it's basically a shell of Visual Studio 2005. So you don't have to have Visual Studio licenses on your report developer boxes. So before, reporting services the designer was inside of Visual Studio. So you had to have the full-blown Visual Studio to be able to develop reporting services reports. Now you need Business Intelligence Studio, which comes with SQL Server 2005. So it's a lighter version. It only gives you the components that your report developers really care about, but you still can create custom assemblies and that sort of thing if you need to within your BI Studio. And you can connect to multiple heterogeneous data stores. So regardless of what the database is that you want to connect to. So from reporting services, you can write a report against a mainframe. You can write a report against an Informix database or against a file share. Just about anything that's a .NET managed data provider, you can connect through reporting services to those data sources. So a lot of times people get confused thinking that, oh, if reporting services comes with SQL Server, I can only write reports against SQL Server. That's not necessarily a true statement. You can go against multiple heterogeneous data sources and gives you the flexibility to be able to report against those data sources. And then one of the other major benefits is the report definition language. So for those of you that don't know, the report definition language, RDL, is an XML-based, it's the XML-based schema for defining reports. So if you look at an RDL file, which will show up in the designer, we'll look at in a minute, and we'll actually look at some of the code behind it, it's really just straight XML. So you can easily describe pretty much anything. It promotes interoperability, allows for real-time updates. You can write code to update your RDL real-time, and you can deploy it to your server. You can create your own applications to create RDL that are then rendered through the reporting services engine. So RDL is an open schema that allows you to be able to flexibly describe your reports. RDL is really different. A lot of reports are compiled and you can't crack it. You can't see the code behind it. The RDL is pure based XML. So one of the most important things in doing a migration, this is one step that we've seen a lot of initially failed reporting services migrations go through, is you need to plan your migration implementation. So don't necessarily look at it as just a short-term technology fix. We want to get rid of crystal reports. We want to implement reporting services. Really look at your implementation from an enterprise perspective. So there's several things you want to do. Analyze your current reporting situation. Identify consolidation opportunities, and this is a really key one where we've been able to save clients a lot of money and a lot of time identifying consolidation opportunities. And then you want to make sure you plan the migration appropriately. So to analyze your current reporting system, your current reporting solution, what you want to do first is identify the users of your reporting solution. And this is really a key component in analyzing your solution, because not all of your users are going to do the same things with the reports. First, you have more of the information designers, and the information designers are the ones who are going to they're the ones who are going to go in, create the reports, design the reports that are going to be used by the business. Their main tools are going to be Report Designer. They're going to be going into Report Manager to deploy the reports and to administer the reports, to manage the reports. If they're going to use Report Builder, they'll be the ones that are creating the models, which we discussed a little bit earlier. But these information designers are going to be the key people that are designing the reports. And that's typically the smallest user group that you're going to have in your reporting solution. Your information analysts are going to be the ones that analyze the reports that the designers distribute. So a lot of times your information analysts will be the ones that are going to consume your reporting services reports, but then they're also going to want to go create their own reports and dive in and do more analysis on those reports. So the analysts would be maybe a financial analyst within a company who would run a report and then maybe pull it into Excel and edit that report to get it to a certain point that then they could push it down to a store to be able to change their business based on the information that the analyst digs up. And finally, there's the information worker, and your information worker are going to be the users of the report viewer and report manager. They're consuming the data. They're the ones who are looking at the reports and then making decisions to do at their job in the end. So knowing your different users is very important when you're going through and defining what your reporting solution is going to be, because there's different components of a reporting services implementation that you're going to use, and identifying and really understanding your users is something that's important when you're determining what your solution is going to look like. And some of the things that we like to do when we go through and analyze the reports to determine what type of report is this, does the report really need to exist? One thing we've seen a lot of in our report when we've gone in and evaluated companies' current reporting environment is that a lot of the Crystal reports either aren't being used, or there's duplicated data, or they've been one-off things that the end user has developed through Crystal reports and then deployed. And so some of the things to go through is to determine what users and groups use the report. So you want to determine who are the end users of the report, and can that report possibly be replaced by a report builder? Do you actually need to go develop this report and deploy it? How frequently is the report accessed? We've seen reports that an analyst had told us that they couldn't lose, but then when we went in and actually ran a usage report against the report, it hadn't been running over a year, and that's a pretty common thing throughout the organization. So how's the report accessed? Are they getting the report in email? Are they going to a file share and pulling it down? Are they accessing it through the web interactively? Is the report used in other reports? Are they sub-reports? We've seen a lot of sub-reports, embedded reports that needed to be rolled into different reports. What's the data source? What information is being displayed? What business decisions are being made based on the report? And most importantly, is the report still being used by the organization? And there's been a lot of reports we've seen as we've gone in and started to analyze current reporting solutions with Crystal reports, where reports aren't even being used at all by the organization anymore, yet they're being maintained by IT. So that kind of leads us into the next major point when you're planning your reporting service, Crystal reports to reporting services migration, is identifying consolidation and standardizing opportunities. So there are typically a lot of consolidation opportunities when you're replacing a legacy system. A lot of times multiple reports will have duplicate information. We've seen reports that have 15 columns, and then we've seen another report that has 10 of those 15 columns, but it's the exact same report, sorted the exact same way. There's just a few more columns on one report. And that is probably a candidate for consolidation, and you can go through and really knock down the number of reports. At one client, we were able to pull them from over 700 Crystal reports down to under 200 reports, just by going through and looking at consolidation opportunities and analyzing their current reporting solution. And so a lot of times your Crystal reports migration may seem very daunting because you have 700 or 1,000 reports, and you think this effort's going to be just unbelievable, and we can't take it. But if you really get in and look at and analyze your reporting solution and look at your consolidation and consolidation opportunities, it may be much smaller than what you believe. And those type of assessments can be done fairly quickly. And look for possible standardizing opportunities. We've been able to really improve a lot of organizations' their standardized processes for reporting. One example is using stored procedures rather than SQL when retrieving data for reports. So we've seen, if we would go into an organization, look and see a bunch of embedded SQL within Crystal reports, and if we went in and pulled that data out and moved the stored procedure and the data processing back to the server, it improved the performance of the report. It allowed them to encapsulate all of their SQL and stored procedures. The DBAs could perform optimizations on those stored procedures and on the SQL within the stored procedures, and it improved their organization from an IT perspective of being able to manage their SQL and manage their reports. And another good opportunity is to set look and feel by report types. A lot of times at organizations that have had a long-term Crystal reports implementation, you'll see a lot of different types of reports, look and feel, and this is a great opportunity to be able to standardize from an enterprise perspective your look and feel. And so the finance guy is looking at the same type of a report as the guy that's working on the warehouse stock, and that's an important thing for an organization to be able to do that. And the last step is really planning the migration, and one of the things we've really seen is you have to do a phased migration approach. This is how end users generally accept the implementation of reporting services, because even as logical as it may seem that you're still getting the same data, it's still going to look the same, or it's going to look fairly similar to what you had in Crystal. It's still different, and there still is a change management issue to be addressed. And one of the key things to do on that is to create a phased migration approach. So it can help you break up the costs of your reporting services migration, and it can also help your end user adoption. So pick a small group of reports, or pick a certain bite-sized chunk, and show that maybe you could condense their reports down from 100 to 40. Maybe you could give them better interactive reports. Maybe you could take advantage of some of the things that that reporting services offers, and be able to do a phased migration. Communication, that's another very key point in the migration. Make sure that the users understand you're not taking anything away from them, you're just giving them a new reporting platform, and you want to be able to talk about some of the benefits of reporting services and show them so they understand it. Set a target date for the retirement of the Crystal reporting servers and the old reporting solution. So as you do this phased migration approach, if you've got 4 Crystal reporting servers, kill one, and then do the next one down the road, and eventually have a full schedule to retire all of your Crystal reporting servers. Rather than trying to do a big bang and just killing all your Crystal reporting servers and bringing up reporting services, it's better to set a target date and then do that phased approach. And budget time in for training. This is a very key thing that we've seen at our clients is the training. A lot of times if you already have a web-based solution, you think, well, they're just going to be able to go click on a link and it's going to pull up the reporting services report, and they're not going to know the difference, but they really do. And Report Manager is a powerful tool that your end users can use, and it's something that you definitely want to look at them using. So make sure you budget in training for all the user types that we discussed a little bit earlier. And Report Builder training for your information developers and analysts. As you roll out Report Builder, you need to make sure they understand how to use it, make sure they understand the models, and Report Builder training is a key point to your solution, to your migration. So now we're going to talk a little bit about migrating the Crystal reports section by section. We'll talk about some of the basic Crystal report sections and features. We'll do a comparison between the report designer, and then we'll talk about some of the additional sections and features to migrate. So, we'll get to that in a second. So basic Crystal reports sections, features, you have your connection, data source, and parameters. There's a report header and footer, which are the front page of the report, and then on the back page of the report, page headers and footers for each one of the detail pages in between. You have the row level data, which are the details, your groupings, and any kind of subtotals, and then formulas and custom functions that are used within Crystal reports. And each one of these sections are what we're going to be focusing on as I'm going through the demo of migrating a Crystal report to a reporting services report. So there's obviously many more functions with many more sections and features of a Crystal report and of reporting services. But for the purposes of this demo, just to show you how it's really a one-to-one mapping, we're going to focus on the connection on these core items here. So if we go in and look at the comparison here, for your connection, data source, and parameters, the SQL Server 2005 Report Designer match is a data set. And we'll go through that, and you'll actually see a demo of each one of those. The report header and footer actually matches up with the page header and footer. The page header and footer also matches up with the page header and footer in SQL Server 2005 Reporting Services, which is kind of an odd concept, but I think once you see how it works, you'll understand why it is how it is. Crystal reports, the row level data groupings and subtotals map to the table control, a matrix control if you were using a crosstab report, and then a list. And then there's also formulas and custom functions within Crystal reports which map to expressions, inline code, and custom DLLs. And we'll go through some expressions and inline code in the demo as well. So go ahead and go to the next page here. So now we're going to go ahead and get to the demo. So let me share my desktop here. Okay, so for the purposes of the demo, what I've done here is, if everybody's looking at Crystal reports now, and what I did here was created a simple Crystal report that goes against the AdventureWorks database, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with the AdventureWorks database if you've worked with any of the Microsoft tools. And you'll see that there's a logo, we've got a header, a report header. You've got a pretty typical report here. It connects to the AdventureWorks database. It reports on territory sales. There's going to be two commands for the report for SQL. There's going to be one that returns sales data and another that returns a list of territories, and we'll go through the SQL on those here in a minute. There's one parameter for the report, which is for a territory, so they can look at different reports to view the territories by. And then there's also some formulas within this. So let's go ahead and preview this, and you'll see I'm dealing with a small desktop here, so bear with me. So you'll see here that there's a territory and then a salesperson, order number, and total sales. So the territory is currently, the details are suppressed. So if we double click on the territory, now you'll see the territory and the salesperson. And then you'll see the total sales for the salesperson. And now if you want to click on the salesperson, you will see all of their orders and the sales, the detail level below those sales. So pretty standard report. And again, this is the Crystal version of this. Now what we're going to do is be able to walk through this and see step by step how you would migrate this to reporting services. It's a very pragmatic and easily repeatable process as you go through and do the majority of your reports. So let's go over into our report project here. I've got so now we're in Microsoft's BI Studio. I've gone ahead and created a report project, this report project 2. And so what we want to do first off is I'm going to go in and add a new report. So if you click Add New Report here, it's going to take you through the wizard. So I'm just going to go through and create a new report from scratch. The report wizard will allow you to walk through and create a new report, but for the purpose of this, we just want to create a report from scratch. So I'm just going to add my report here. Okay, there it is. And let's go ahead and rename this. Whoops. Let's rename this Territory Sales. Okay, so now we've got our RDL set, and we're ready to start doing our migration. So the first thing we're going to look through is our connection, data source, and parameters. So if we go back over to Crystal Reports, and we look at the Crystal Reports, let's go back to design, so show the Crystal Reports database expert. What you'll see here is a database, and if we right click and look at this, we'll see that it's connecting through ADO, and it's through the SQL DB provider to the AdventureWorks database. And then if we look at each one of the commands below, this first command is a simple select statement from that AdventureWorks database. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to my clipboard, and we'll say OK. Go back over into our reporting services project, and so the first thing we need to do is create our connection and data source. So for the data source, I've already created what's called a shared data source, and if we look at the properties of the shared data source, if we look at the shared data source here, you'll see that it's connecting to the AdventureWorks database on my local host, and it's a SQL Server connection. Now, when you create this shared data source, you can deploy this on your reporting services server, on your report server, and then you can use it. Reports can use it over and over again. So your data source is not stored within your report. So now, if we go into the RDL, we'll see a data set up here. So first, I need to go create a new data set. So the first data set we're going to create is going to be for our territory sales. And for the query string, I'm just going to paste in that SQL that I pulled out of Crystal Reports. We'll say OK. And there it is. And now let's just hit the run button here. We'll run the query, make sure it brings the data back, and it does. So there's your first. There's the first data set that you're going to create. So now if you go back to Crystal, you'll see this other command 1. So we'll go through and edit this command, and this is just a simple select distinct sales territory. So this will allow us to select which sales territories we want to pick for the report. So I'm going to go create another new data set, and we'll just call this one TERR, and I'll paste in my SQL. Say OK. And there's the SQL, and I check it, and we're good. So it brings back all of the sales territories. So the next thing we want to do, we've got our two commands that created the report in Crystal Reports, and now we want to go through and add our parameter. So to add a parameter, or actually let's go over to the Crystal Reports here. Let me close this. And over here, you'll see the reporting services parameter, which is TERR. So if I right-click here and say Edit, so what we'll see here is the prompting text is territory, and if you click on default values, what we'll see is that the browse table that is selecting from a database, and the browse table is command 1. And here are the values that it brings in. They do allow multiple values, and they can edit default values when there's more than one. So that's what we need to be able to translate that over into a reporting services report. So if we go back over into reporting services, click on report parameters under the report menu, you'll see the parameters dialog come up. So we're going to want to add a parameter, and we'll go ahead and name this parameter TERR as well. And we want to make it multi-value. We'll go ahead and allow blank values. It is a string data type. Let's make our prompt territory. And we're going to want to pull this from a query. So the data set we're going to want to use is TERR. And the value field is name, and the label field is name. And then from the default value, we're going to go ahead and leave it as null currently. So we'll say OK. Okay, so now the last step we need to do to be able to have that parameter take place is go back into our query, and we're going to need to add a where clause. So I'm going to add a little where clause here that says where st.name in and my parameter. And now if I run that query, I should be prompted, and I'll just type in Australia, and we'll say OK, and we'll see that that still works. So, at that point we've completed our data portion of the report. So we've brought in all the SQL logic from Crystal Reports. We've added our parameter. Now we're ready to move on to the actual report design. So this can be a little bit challenging with my screen resolution here and get rid of this. Okay. So let's go ahead and get a little more real estate here. And we'll go back into Crystal Reports. And so let's take a look at this report header. The report header has the AdventureWorks logo. It's got a simple header, and let's go, and a print date at the top. So we know what it looks like. So let's go back into Reporting Services, and let's get a little more real estate here. And so what we're going to do to start is add a page header and a page footer. Because if you'll remember from our initial, when we went through each one of the sections, a report header actually equals a page header in Reporting Services. So what we're going to do first off is we'll go in and add a rectangle to our page header. So what the rectangle is it's a region that allows you to be able to group things together. And so there's objects that we want to group together on this first within the header that I'll explain why once we get to that portion. But the reason it's there is so that we can group things together. So the next thing we want to do is go in and add our image. And we'll drop that on there. And we're going to make this an embedded image. And I'm going to go pick an image. Here's the AdventureWorks logo. And we'll say next and finish. And we'll drag this over to the corner. Resize a little bit. Okay. So now the next thing we want to do, if we go back to our Crystal Reports, and you'll see this looks very similar. You know, these tools are very comparable from a design perspective. I've trained many developers to move from Crystal Reports to Reporting Services, and it's typically a fairly easy transition. So next we have the territory sales header and then a print date up in the corner. So let's go ahead and go back into our controls, which you'll see all of the controls here. Drag a text box on here, and we'll make it a little bit bigger. Oop. And we'll call it territory sales. And let's make this 16 point. Bold it. And we'll make it dark blue. And let's drag that here so that it looks like our Crystal report. And the last thing we need to do is add our page number if we go back to the Crystal reports. So we'll go add another text box up in the corner and make this a little bit bigger. And now we're going to get our first introduction to the expression editor. So what I want to do here is put one of our globals in there. So if we go look at our globals, you'll see there's several globals that come with every report that you can enter in anywhere. You've got page number, execution time, report folder. So I'm going to go in and put my execution time. Say OK. There's the execution time. And so if you look back and forth, these two headers look very similar. So the next thing we need to do, though, is that this is a page header, not a report header. This is a page header. Currently, this will show up at the top of every page. So we need to make sure that this only shows up on the first page. So to do that, we'll select our rectangle, and we're going to want to look at the properties of our rectangle. And let's look at the visibility. And from there, we're going to write a little expression that's going to suppress this rectangle on subsequent pages. So to do that, we can write a simple VB function, and we're going to check to see if the page number is number 1. And if it is number 1, then we're going to display it. If it's not number 1, then we're not going to display it. And that's our expression. So we'll say OK. And then the last thing we need to do is go down to our page footer and add our page number. And we'll do another expression here. And let's go add our page number. And that'll do it. So what we've done there is created our report header and report footer. Now the next thing, if we go back over and look at our Crystal reports, is our page header and page footer. Now for a page header and page footer within Crystal, within reporting services, we will meet that objective by using the table header in reporting services, and after we add the table, we'll go through and show that. So now what we want to do is add our row level detail. So we're ready to add the actual data. So this is a simple tabular style report. It's got some easy drill down, a couple of groupings by territory and one by salesperson. So we need to determine what data region are we going to use in reporting services to be able to meet this goal. There's several different regions you can use. You can use a matrix, a list, a table. For the purposes of this, we know that a table is best going to be able to allow you to go in and create your detail and your grouping. So to mimic this behavior in Crystal Reports, we're going to want to create a table. So let's go back over into reporting services. I'm going to go to my toolbox. I'm going to drag a table on. And let's go ahead and make these a little bit smaller. Oops. And I'm going to go add a column. Okay, so now we've got our table. So I'm going to drag this up, dock it to the body. Okay, so we've got our table. So now what we need to do is bind our table to a data source. So let's go to Properties, and you'll see Data Set Name. And what we're going to do is pick Territory Sales, because that's where our data is coming from. So we'll say OK. So now we have this bound to a data set. So the next thing, if we look over at Crystal Reports, we'll see that there is a couple of groups here. So I'm going to go ahead and add my groups that I know I'm going to need. So I'll insert the first group here, which is going to be based on the territory, which is our name field. We'll say OK. Then the next group I need to do is based on our salesperson. So I'm going to pick the salesperson ID. We'll say OK. Okay, so now we have all of the groups and the detail that we need. So now it's time to add the data. So to add the data, what we're going to do is go over to our, whoops. I have to expand this a little bit. Okay, so what we'll do is look at our territory sales, and the first thing we're going to do is add our territory name, and let's change this to territory, and that is going to be in your first grouping box. And the next thing we're going to want to do is if we go back into Crystal Reports and preview this, we'll see that the salesperson, if you drill down into this, it's a first name and last name together. So we need to go in and create a little concatenate, a little string, a little function to be able to do that. So I'm going to click on expression, and we'll say equals. Let me find my field here, first name, and then again it's VB syntax. And there you go. And then we'll put a little header in here, name. So now we have our two levels of grouping. So our third is going to be the detail. So to do the detail, it's very simple. We'll drag a sales order number here, automatically populates the header for you. We'll do the same thing with total due. Okay, now let's go ahead and if we go back and look at Crystal Reports in our design view, you'll see that there's that there's total due on each one of these different groups, so that as you expand, you'll see your total due. So what we want to do at this point is add our totals, our subtotals, for each one of our different levels. And you'll see to do that, you drag and drop the field into the table. and it automatically creates your sum, which is kind of nice. Makes it a little bit easier to create these. So now if we go back in, let's go ahead and get rid of our unused groups here. Oh, whoops. Undo that. And let me just delete that. And we'll delete that row. We'll delete that row. So now we've got our basic table. Let's drag this up, make it a little cleaner. Okay, so now we've got our report. So the next thing we need to do is, well, first let's make these headers nice. Kind of forgot to do that. So we'll bold these, we'll underline it, and let's go and make it the same color that we made the header. So we'll make this dark blue. Okay, so next thing we want to do is be able to go in and change to make so that initially our rows are hidden. So to do that, we're going to use row properties. So let's look at our properties here. And if we go over and look at our visibility properties, we'll see that hidden is false. So we want to change hidden to be true. And then we want to set a toggle so that when you click on that, it opens up. So what we'll see here is name. We know we want to toggle on name. When name is changed, then we want this to expand. So that's the name toggle is set up. So the next thing we're going to want to do is do the same thing for the detail row level data. So we'll go to visibility, and we'll say it's hidden is true. And text box 25, which is our first name, which is our formula for first name, last name, is what we want that to toggle on. So, and the last thing we want to do here for just basic formatting, if we go back to the Crystal report and take a look at our preview, is your sales are in dollars. So we're going to want to go back over to reporting services, and we're going to want to change this column to be able to display dollars. So in our format here, we're just going to type a capital C. And now if we look at our Crystal reports, look at our design, looks like pretty much everything's there. So let's go ahead and preview this report. So if we preview the report, you'll see in the drop-down list box that we have our multi-list select list box, which is nice. So I'm going to choose, well, for the first preview, we'll go ahead and select all. Let's view the report. And you'll see that the report looks very similar to the Crystal report. And as we drill down, you can see each one of the different levels that we implemented. So as you can see, the functionality is about the same. We've done all this in about 10 minutes. So it can be done very quickly to migrate your reports from a manual perspective. So with that, let's go back into our slides here. Okay, so there are some additional sections. What we showed was just the basics. I wanted to show you just the very basic sections to migrate a Crystal report to reporting services reports. There are obviously other sections. You have pivot tables and matrices, charts and graphs. You can connect to multiple data sources. And there are some, specifically on the multiple data sources, Crystal reports and reporting services can both connect to a wide range of data sources. But using multiple data sources on a Crystal report has been known to cause performance issues. You have to use multiple sub-reports on a single master to display data from the multiple data sources. But what reporting services allows designers to do is create multiple data sources in a single report, and then you can use those in different regions on the control. So there's some places where you may be able to actually improve performance on your reports through migrating to reporting services. And one example of that is on the multiple data sources and sub-reports. Linking reports, you can link reports as well through URL access. In Crystal, you have to create an open document link on a particular field to handle the report redirection. And you also have to have the enterprise version to get access to the report repository. But reporting services provide you the ability to link and pass parameters to other reports through setting navigation properties for the object. So you can even link to reports located on other report servers through the URL access and provide those capabilities in reporting services. So it makes it, reporting services makes it a little bit easier to be able to link to additional reports outside of your report. So one more thing I wanted to show real quick on the demo here is if we go back into the reporting services report that we've created, one thing that people ask a lot about is how do I migrate my formulas? For example, database fields don't always provide the data exactly how you want it, and reporting service or Crystal Reports, you can do functions, formulas to do data generations, to do that type of data generation. And one of the ways you can do that is through the formula workshop to populate report items like text box objects, that sort of thing. Within reporting services, I've showed you the expression editor, and you can perform calculations and manipulate strings. And this is a comparable feature to the formula workshop in Crystal. But you can only the scope of the code that I've showed up to this point is just where the expression is defined. So within reporting services, you can also create VB.NET functions that can be used throughout the report. So I want to show you that feature real quick of reporting services because it's kind of a nice feature. So let's go back in the layout here. And if we go to our report properties and go to code, what we'll do here, whoops, I'm going to have to cancel that dialog to get my code. Let me open up my code here. And I'm just going to copy this little VB function that I wrote. And we'll go back into our report, and we'll go into the code window, and I'm just going to paste this function. And all this function does is allows you to pass in a number, and then it's going to set the color. So the function's called setColor. So we'll say OK. And now what I'm going to do on this column is I'm going to go to my color, and I'm going to create a color property, and I'm going to create an expression. And to create that expression, I'm going to write code dot, and you'll see it doesn't show up in my text here, but basically the code keyword is very similar to a namespace in VB. So after that, we'll enter in our function, so code set color, and we will type in sum of your total due So what this is doing is it's going to pass in the sum of the total due in our report to the function, and then based on if it's over $10 million, it will show up as red. If it's under $10 million, it won't. And this is a great way to be able to point out things in reports that are important. So we'll say OK here, and we'll go preview it. And let's select all. And you'll see over here that the values have turned to red, and I did the top one as well. But so this will show you the point. This gets the point across that you can create your own VB.NET functions and use those throughout the scope of the report. Okay, so quickly here we'll wrap up. So a couple other things. There are some alternative migration approaches. I mentioned the report design wizard. There is that's one of two wizards that walks the designer through selecting the data sources, creating the query, choosing the type of report, and doing the basic layout and basic formatting. The report design wizard is a nice tool to use. And then automating the migration, you can use custom application development through leveraging the Microsoft.NET Framework, CrystalReports.NET API. You can parse the report at an object level. You can leverage the Reporting Services API to map and create your custom RDL. There are third-party accelerators. Hitachi Consulting has one. We also have a proven conversion track record from Crystal Reports to reporting services. There are tools and people that can help you out there to migrate your Crystal Reports solution to reporting services. There's also other third-party vendors that provide solutions, and they'll help you accelerate the process. But in the end, it's a step-by-step process to get through it, and testing is a very key portion of it as well. So the session summary, again, analyze your reporting solution, look at your existing reporting solution, determine what it's going to take, consolidate and simplify, very key thing, and will help you get a measurable ROI on the project. Plan an incremental migration with measurable successes that you can go through. Look at using accelerators to help you accelerate your migration. And the one thing that we've really seen for companies that really want to do this, the ROI is almost always justified. You can almost always come up with cost savings around what you're going to do from implementing reporting services and the services around it. So as far as next steps, start migrating your reports. Here's my email contact information. I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions you have around that, or any help that you guys may need migrating your reports. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Miriam for the question and answers.
Thank you very much, Eric. As Eric mentioned, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and use the Ask button and submit your questions right now. I'll be answering them in just a few moments. The recording of this session will be available in 24 hours at www.microsoft.com/webcast. If you have any webcast content ideas, we'd be happy to hear from you. Please contact us using the URL listed for you on the screen. And today's session was brought to you using Microsoft Office Live Meetings. You can try it yourself for 14 days free of charge at www.microsoft.com/presents-live. Moving on, I'd like to point out that I'm about to launch the survey for the session. And if you do fill out the survey, your name would be entered for a drawing for a portable 40 gigabyte MP3 WMA player. We get 10 of those away each month, so there's a good chance that you could win. So please take some time, fill out the survey, and let us know how we could do even better next time around. Eric, back to you so you can take questions at this time, please.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions here. Thank you for the questions. One of the first questions here is, do you provide SQL reporting services training for information developers online? I don't know that we have online training. I don't know that Microsoft offers online training, but as Hitachi Consulting, we do offer training through Microsoft for reporting services. We developed the training curriculum for SQL 2005 and reporting services, and do have reporting services training. We can do the training at your site. We also have public classes that are available, and if you'd like some information, please feel free to contact me about that. Let's see, here's another question. What if you use the Crystal semantic layer? And this is something we've seen. Some companies have used the semantic layer to be able to access reports. And basically, if you do that, it's just a little bit more difficult to get to the SQL. So a lot of times that what we see with these reporting services implementations is it's easy to go through and just cut and paste the SQL, just like I did. Or if you're using store procedures, it's much easier because all you do is connect to the reporting, connect to your store procedures. But if you use a semantic layer, it's just going to be a little bit more difficult to do, but it is still doable. Let's see. Trying to find some of these. If I don't address your question in this session, then I will address it in an email to you, or I'll address it to you on a personal level. So I'm trying to go through and see the ones that would be appropriate here. Let's see. Does SQL Reporting Services provide web-based report distribution like Crystal Enterprise? Yes, it does. Reporting Services allows web-based reports. So through Report Manager, you can access reporting services reports through the web. You can also access reporting services reports through SharePoint or through a custom developed site if you would like. Reporting services also allows you to be able to create subscriptions to reports where the report will be executed on the server and emailed to you in the morning, and you can have it emailed to you either by Excel or PDF or a link or a numerous amount of different rendering formats. So yes, primarily reporting services, what we've seen, is used as an interactive platform for people to go access reports via the web. Let's see. Is it possible to set dynamic groups by? In Crystal, you can show a drop-down so users can group by territory or client. Not sure I understand that question. I'll get back to you on that one. How to print a barcode in SQL Server 2005 report. You can print barcodes in SQL 2005. One of the last projects we worked on was for a company in their warehouse management group, and we had to print barcodes. And through doing that, we had to embed a third-party control within the reporting services report. But it can be done through using a third-party control. How does reporting services compare to Crystal when used in a predominantly document-based as opposed to a web-based environment? You know, I haven't actually seen that, but from my understanding, you know, through a combination of SharePoint, and I mean, just kind of architecting this in my head, through a combination of using SharePoint and reporting services and the rendering reports via a scheduler or via the subscription manager and reporting services, could be handled very easily. I don't see why it would be any different. Most of the implementations I've seen are either web-based, or specifically around Crystal reports, you see a lot of applications, a lot of ASP type applications that use Crystal reports for reporting, and they just want to get rid of it and, you know, do more operational style reporting with reporting services. So I think it could be accomplished, and from what I know about the two different products, and I've worked with Crystal reports for a long time as well, that, you know, I think either one would be comparable in that sense. And then one question here: should we deploy BI Studio to our end users? You know, that's really a question of how advanced your end users are. If your end users are fairly technical people, then I would think BI Studio would be okay, as long as they're not scared about it. Now, Report Builder is probably your best option there, most likely, and that would be one of those things where we need to go in, analyze that solution, and determine if it would be better to give them the full-blown BI Studio version of reporting services, or whether you would want to distribute Report Builder. You know, my first inclination on that would be, this sounds like a good option for Report Builder. Okay, that's all the questions I'll do over the phone right now. I will follow up with you on a personal basis for some of these other questions that I've seen here. So thank you for the questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for presenting for us today, Eric, and answering all the questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's MSDN webcast. At this point, please disconnect from the audio portion of this conference. Thank you.